What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the 2 Game Podcast, where I am continuing my review series of Daredevil Born Again. Let's just go ahead and jump into this. We are going to recap and review episode number 7. So if you have not been caught up through episode 7, highly recommend pausing this video and then coming back to it once you have caught up with everything, because we are going to be talking about full spoilers from this point forward. And like I said, I'm going to recap it just real quick to kind of go over the main story beats of this episode, and then I'll give you my final thoughts on the episode as a whole. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into this shit, guys. So episode 7, titled Art for Art's Sake, a recuperating Angela tells the police that she was saved by Daredevil and directs them to Muse's lair. Detective Kim reports to Fisk, who is angry that Daredevil has returned, that the primary suspect for Muse is a troubled young man named Bastion Cooper. Luca asks Vanessa to return to her criminal activities behind Fisk's back. In a session with Glenn, Bastion thanks her for helping him embrace his true identity. She realizes he is Muse, and Bastion knocks her unconscious. Matt and the anti-vigilante task force separately find paintings of Glenn in Muse's lair and go to save her. As Daredevil, Matt arrives at Glenn's office first and rescues her. As the anti-vigilante task force prepares to enter, Glenn fatally shoots Muse before fainting. Matt stabilizes her before the anti-vigilante task force arrives. Fisk gives credit for stopping Muse to the task force and publicly declares them to be heroes. Blake threatens BB into removing eyewitness mentions of Daredevil's involvement in the incident from her blog. A recovering Glenn tells Murdock that she heard Daredevil say her name. Vanessa seemingly sends Luca to kill Fisk, but this is a trap, and Cashman kills Luca instead. So overall, I thought this was a good episode, but it's not great. And I think the biggest issue with this episode is not necessarily the scenes themselves. It's really the context of the whole season up to this point. I have been complaining through the first 6 episodes, and then obviously through this episode, that the side characters and the other people surrounding Daredevil and Wilson Fisk are not nearly as strong as they were with the Netflix series. And I think that's really one of the biggest issues with Born Again so far, is there's just nothing about these characters that they've given to us. They're not compelling enough to really carry the storylines. And when you have moments like when Bastion kind of alludes to the fact that he's Muse and Heather ends up finding out that's who it is. That scene, while it's a great scene, it adds a little bit of attention to it for sure. But that scene as a whole doesn't feel, it just feels superficial to me. Like there's no legwork or development of those characters beforehand, and it prevents any of those scenes from having any real emotional impact or any real weight to them. Yeah, they're good scenes, but they could be so much better if we had compelling side characters. You know, we had reasons to actually care for Heather going through this. Now, I think they did a decent enough job in this episode of kind of making us care for her character a little bit more than we have in the first 6 episodes. But nonetheless, I think they have really suffered in that department so far through this season because they just haven't done the legwork for it. And then that gets me to the biggest thing that really happened in this episode. And I don't know for a fact that Muse is dead, okay? I want to believe that he is still alive out there. They kind of teased the fuck out of a really dope character being introduced into this first season of Born Again. And I was pretty excited about it. And I mentioned it on my last review of episode 6 that I couldn't believe that as a main villain for this entire season, they're just now introducing Muse. Like he finally gets like some screen time on an episode. Yeah, we've seen little snippets of him here and there, but it was really episode 6 where he kind of made his grand appearance to the world. And he was super interesting. Like that whole episode was so fucking good because you had this idea that, okay, like shit's going to go down for the next few episodes and it's going to be great, right? And then we have this scene with him and Heather. And yeah, I had mentioned over the last several episodes that I felt like Muse was going to go after Heather. Now, granted, the context behind that was not what I had predicted. But when he goes after her and then he ends up getting killed by her in this episode, and I put air quotes around that because, I mean, why would they why would they tease the shit out of this character, this villain, just to kill him off within 2 episodes? If that is the case, it will be one of the biggest waste of a villain that Marvel has ever done. And they've done some pretty shitty jobs with villains over the years. And this would be up there with some of the worst, because I just think it's a colossal mistake to introduce this character, not only, halfway through the season, but then only give 2 episodes with him. And then he just gets mauled down basically in like 5 minutes with being seen. So it's very disappointing if this is where the Muse storyline ends. Like, that whole fight between him and Daredevil in the office was really great. I loved it. It's close quarters combat. You have to deal with Heather being on the other side and her being so close to that fight that there's really no room for mistakes for Daredevil. So there's tension there. 100% there's tension there, but it could have been so much better had we had a little bit more screen time with Heather in the first 6 episodes. And also the fact that we may be done with the Muse storyline up to this point, that's going to be very disappointing. And I really hope that there's, I don't know. I hope that there is a gotcha moment where he's still alive or something along those lines. It seemed pretty clear cut that he was dead in that scene. They might pull some, comic booky shit there and say, oh, well, he was able to, lower his heart rate to where you couldn't tell or some bullshit like that, right? So is there potential for that? Sure. I don't know. I feel like there's multiple ideas going on with season 1 so far, and I know that there were these issues with the script. They redid it and they refilmed some stuff and they changed some of the producers or whatever the case was. I understand all that, but that really has hurt this series so far. And I know that they just started filming season 2, so maybe they correct that in a follow-up season. But this could have been so much better than what it was if they would have just given us some more time with some of these side characters. They're just not nearly as compelling of characters as Foggy, as Karen, as Detective Mahoney. Those characters were really good. Or even Ben's character from season 1. Like, I loved that character. You can name multiple characters over those first 3 seasons that really elevated the show. And they have just completely discontinued all of that and thrown that to the wayside. And if we're being honest, when I go back and I do the full season review of this, I'm just going to tease it just a little bit. I think that is going to end up being the biggest thing that holds us back from ever being great. It might be worth a watch, might be good in the context of the entire series, but as of right now, and I'm enjoying from episode to episode for sure. Like let's not get that confused. I am 100% enjoying the show, but it could be so much better. We could be having this in the conversation of The Penguin or Daredevil season 3, or even some of the other greatest comic book TV shows ever made. There was the potential there for this to be in that conversation. And through 7 episodes, that's not going to happen. Like, regardless of what happens in the final 2 episodes, I just don't see how they can really capitalize on everything or wrap up some of the storylines that have happened over the course of this season and make them compelling characters. I just don't foresee it happening. It might make the season a little bit better, but we're past the point of this being a truly great season, I think. But ultimately, I think this is a good one overall. But also, one thing that I want to mention, this series is completely avoiding the Netflix series because I feel bamboozled up to this point. We've lost Karen, we've lost Foggy. They did the promotional runs for this season, and well, one got killed, obviously, but Karen hasn't been in this since episode 2. I think this was, I feel cheated as a fan in that regard, and the fact that this was kind of marketed as a continuation, but also the fact that it was a kind of a standalone thing. We have just completely disregarded everything within the Netflix series. I mean, there's been, Foggy, Karen, you had to know who they were. And then there's this little thing in this episode where Fisk is talking about Daredevil destroying his empire about 10 years ago. And we get some of that, and obviously if you've watched the previous series, you kind of understand what he's talking about. And I just don't care for the whole teeter on the whole reboot versus a continuation thing that we've got going on here. But that's really a discussion for the full season ahead. And then the last thing I want to mention about the episode, you know, we get all these kind of storylines with Fisk where we feel like he's finally back. You know, the last scene is him kind of doing something like Sopranos style with it, which I thought was pretty cool. You know, we have Vanessa kind of ambushing Luca, telling him to go to this restaurant. He has his back to the door, which when you're watching this scene, like it's pretty predictable. Like, let's be completely honest, the whole situation was predictable from the start. Like, Luca, you have just confirmed that you're probably one of the dumbest villains out there, if you want to call him a villain. But he has his back to the door. Do we think that Fisk, of all people, would have his back to the door of a restaurant? Not a chance. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, dude, this is an ambush for sure. And we get the kill shot, which was great. But this was the point that Fisk, and I know I said it on the last episode, but this to me is officially where Fisk is back as the Kingpin. He is moving pieces. He is taking out his enemies. But also on the flip side of things, at the very beginning of the episode, when Fisk finds out that Daredevil is back, dude, the facial expression that Vincent D'Onofrio gives in that scene is so pitch perfect. He has like this, like they tell him, oh, it was Daredevil. He has this fuck me like expression on his face, like this dude just won't leave me the fuck alone expression. And it was absolutely fantastic. I think that moment, plus some of the other moments that we've had, especially in the last couple episodes, with Matt saying "fuck it" when he dons the cowl again. Little bits of humor have been woven through this, and I really appreciate those moments. I do say, because it's not the typical Marvel humor, and I've made it known on several podcasts before that I just really don't give a shit about the Marvel humor. It's kind of abysmal to me. So when they have these little moments in these episodes, I'm very appreciative of that, because it feels like they actually gave it some thought. It doesn't feel super generic like some of the other shit that we've had in the MCU. But yeah, guys, overall, I like this episode a lot, but it could have been so much better. It could have been great if we would have just had some legwork done on some of these side characters, specifically Heather, up to this point. They did a decent job of the shower scene and talking with Matt about, you know, why he has the bruises on him and whatnot. I think they did a decent enough job of trying to make you care for her character, but it was kind of one of those things where it was a little too late kind of thing. And I just wish they would have done that in some of the previous episodes to make these moments more compelling, have more weight behind them, and more emotional. Like, I should be feeling something during those scenes, and I 100% did not. And that's a real bummer to me. But guys, let me know down in the comments below of what you thought about episode 7. Where's the stack up on some of the other episodes of Born Again? And give me your thoughts on the season so far. And what are your thoughts on the final 2 episodes? But guys, that is going to be it for me. I will catch y'all next week on the next episode. Laters.